So, we talked a lot about potential use cases in radiology. So, Dr. Hawk, what kind of training or education do you think radiologists need to effectively work with generative AI tools? What are some of the pitfalls that us radiologists should be aware of? And speaking of education, how should current radiologists or radiology residency programs prepare for an AI-driven future?
It's a great question. I think there's one side of it that's education, just learning it, and there's another side that's trust. And developing trust is really the key to adaptability. And a lot of people don't trust AI because they don't understand it. A lot of mistrust is built from misunderstanding or lack of understanding. So education is not only key to just understanding what you're doing and learning the buttonology of it, but really developing a trust in this technology and keeping your eyes on the screen and knowing that it's creating something as you're dictating and looking at these images. That sense of trust is key to adaptation. Last night, I was writing a communications method for the American Board of Nuclear Medicine. I sit as the communications chair. And my message was on how different generations across the history of nuclear medicine and radiology have adapted technology in different ways. And my generation, I'm a millennial, has adapted technology in a different way than other generations across the spectrum. And the newest generation of people coming up are really digital natives. They love this technology. They consume this technology socially on a daily, if not hourly basis. And that's different than my generation or people that are older than me. I would say it's the kind of thing that people should use and will get comfortable using earlier. I have 3 teenage sons. One of them asked me if he could use image generative AI to illustrate a short story he made for school. And I said, as long as you get your teacher's permission, let's learn how to use this AI together. And we did. So a lot of this education is pre-medicine, pre-clinical, and starts even in the teenage years. But that aside, when you get to the level of the radiologist, education has to be approached as a not one size fits all type thing. Different types of generations of radiologists need different types of education to develop a comfort and an understanding and ultimately trust, which leads to adaptation in this technology. So some people like to understand what's under the hood, the nuts and bolts behind the neural networks or whatever you have in your tool. Other people just like to understand how it works and what the pitfalls are and where it falls short. But that education needs to be custom tailored to each group of radiologists. I would say right now, focusing on resident and trainee education is key because they are the future of the people using these technologies. But we definitely want adaptation right now. So developing tailored education to people that are outside of training and in a different generation is also very, very important. And approaching it with humanness and a high level of emotional intelligence and cultural sensitivity is going to be key. The last thing I'll say is that one of the things I like to talk about is diversity in AI. And we need to develop methods of education that resonate with lots of different groups of people, addressing all of the wonderful minorities across our healthcare team and the different educational needs that they have to make sure that we are getting adaptability across all different cohorts of members of the healthcare team.
Those are great points. Dr. Yang, would you like to add?
Love what Dr. Hawk just shared. I think that, personalized education is going to be the future. I think back to my own education and think about how, we talked about being audio learners versus visual learners. You'd have people who love sitting in lectures and people who don't. And I think that, as Dr. Hawk mentioned, now the generations are really just consuming technology at a very different speed than even our generation did. So being able to adapt to that, I think, is important. I also think, understanding that we are early adopters and that there are pitfalls is extremely important. I think that, there are definitely biases that we need to be aware of, trainees need to be aware of, we need to be aware of. And, it's a culture shift, right? So I think that seeing, certain cultures who really are, not ready for change, I think being able to have that discussion and about where those kind of pitfalls and what their concerns are is really important. There's automation bias, right? So favoring that the AI is correct over your human decision can be a pitfall. I think the alternative algorithmic aversion is also a pitfall, right? Where because it's AI, it's easy to reject as well. So kind of finding that balance in between, I think, is really important. But sometimes we don't know until we start kind of going down the road. And so I think as we're learning more and more about the process, continuing to have these discussions is really vital. I also, like Dr. Hawk mentioned, I think, DEI is very close to my heart. And I think that as we go forward, both in research, and we talked about earlier using augmented data and synthesized data, all those are concerns that we need to be really aware of: the ethics, liability, medical, legal, where is that all going to go? I think it's still being discussed, but we cannot be behind, because I think these things lag, right? And it takes a lot of time to catch up to. And I think if we're not having those discussions actively now, and putting things in place to safeguard, then that can be a problem.